Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the What Is podcast. I'm Ryan and this is Briana, and we are so excited to share a bonus episode with you. It's really an extenuation of our last episode, What Is a Wall? And as we were discussing this, we were thinking about our friend Sue Warnke, who is in Silicon Valley, and she is one of the best people I've ever seen at breaking down perceived and real walls in the marketplace and just in the community overall. So I'm happy to introduce Sue. And Sue, thank you for joining our podcast today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Ryan and Briana.
Yeah, and just a little background on Sue. Sue is the Senior Director of Content and Communications Experience at Salesforce, which is one of the leading tech companies in the world. She's also the president of Faithforce San Francisco and Christians at Salesforce, these networks that are employee resource groups. And so she started that very small, and it is growing and growing, and she is being the hands and feet of Jesus in Silicon Valley.
Thank you.
And so what I want to do is actually, she has an amazing testimony. I first heard this. We did a panel discussion at Google talking about the intersection of faith and technology. And she shared her testimony, and you could literally see the entire room lean into what you had to say. And speaking of lean in, you have a blog called leanership.org, and you publish amazing content on that. So if anybody is interested, I highly encourage you to go to that blog and see what Sue posts about. But your testimony was so fascinating and so encouraging, and I think inspiring for the people in the room at Google. Would you start us off with just sharing about your testimony?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of kind of the Bethel community and Bethel Tech, and we've had students come down and experience some of our celebrations, our Easter celebrations down at Salesforce. I'm not a Salesforce spokesperson by any means. This is really just my story. But I've also been up to Reading and received prayer and blessings from all of you. So it's such an honor to kind of be part of this with you today. Awesome. My testimony, so I actually have only been a Christian for about 3 years. And kind of the story is I grew up in a very religious town. I was kind of the only person that was not part of that religion in all of my classes, so I was kind of an outsider. My parents had gone to church, but they kind of walked away from it when I was in preschool. So I grew up agnostic. Again, I was kind of the only agnostic in my classes, and really built up a wall around me about faith because I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like nobody was curious about me and what I thought. It was really all about kind of pressuring me to follow that faith. So I kind of decided to follow a different God. And that was the God of accomplishment, which actually works really well in life. It's a very effective God to follow for a certain amount of time until it isn't. Yeah. And I hit that wall, in my about 40 years old, just several years ago, about 5 years ago. And I thought, why am I not fulfilled? Why do I have this void? I have everything in the world, a great job, wonderful family, friends. And I thought, well, it must be my job. I'll go pursue a new job and that will fulfill the void. And luckily, when I did pursue that new job, I kind of fell flat on my face. And so I experienced failure for the first big time in my life. And that was step one. Step two is I couldn't fix it. I couldn't fix this job situation. And so I remember I was in a hotel room in Virginia at a conference, and I said out loud, I give up. And I'd never said that before. It wasn't that I give up on life, but I, for the first time in my life, cannot fix this situation. And it wasn't until then that things started to change, and it happened in little bite-sized pieces. Suddenly, I wanted to listen to Christian music out of the blue, which I had always sort of scoffed at, and I sort of put on my headphones and didn't want anybody to know I was listening to Christian music.
What were you listening to?
I just, I didn't even know how to find Christian music. So I went onto Spotify and I searched for God.
Oh, interesting.
That's awesome. He's a great musician, by the way.
He's written many songs.
So I don't know what came up. It was some worship channel, and I was so very embarrassed, but I couldn't stop listening to it. And then suddenly, pure as day, popped in my head the image of my kid's old karate teacher from like 6 years ago. And all of a sudden, I remembered that he had invited me to church. Which I also had scoffed at the time. But suddenly I just thought, I'm supposed to text this guy. And I pulled out my phone and I texted him after these years. And I said, hey, Lee, long time no chat. Can I go to church with you?
Wow.
He said, no.
And the walls were created.
I said, absolutely. And I came, and it was just this really beautiful, profound experience. And I was very confused by it all. Somebody prayed for me there. I'd never been prayed over before. And I was sort of processing all of this, about ready to reject it all again, afterwards. This is too weird for me. And I was in a hotel room in Austin just a few days later, and this karate teacher texted me out of the blue, and he said something very important. He said, Sue, I pray that the Holy Spirit will reveal himself to you today. Which, honestly, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
But I felt it. I felt how profound it was that this man took time out of his day randomly to text me this very bold prayer. And I felt it, and I just sat on the bed like absorbing the love. Wow. Whatever the words meant, I felt the love of it. And 1 hour later, I got a phone call, and it was from my aunt, Jean, and we never talked about faith in my family and my relatives. And she sounded nervous, and she said, Sue, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm supposed to call you right now and tell you about God. And I sort of said, well, I think I'm supposed to listen to you.
Yeah.
And I just listened to her. She didn't preach. She told me 3 stories of Jesus in her life, and it makes me want to cry thinking of it, of how at hard times God had lifted, pain out of her life, and how people had come around her. And I said, what made you call me right now? And she said, remember when Missy died? So her daughter Missy died of an aneurysm about 20 years earlier. And she said, that night, I felt like I was supposed to call her, and I didn't, because I didn't want to wake her up. And, her daughter died that night, and who knows what that call would have done. But she said, afterwards, she said, if I promised God that if I ever felt like that again, I would obey. And I felt like that today. I felt like I'm supposed to call you. Wow. And she called me, and, she ended up passing away herself just a few months after that of cancer.
Really? Oh,
so this call changed my whole life, changed everything. So I listened, and I felt that I was in the presence of something I'd never experienced before in this call, and it was only 30 minutes. Wow. And by the end of it, I had to make a decision. Yeah. Is this a coincidence, or is this true? And there's no other decision to be made there. Yeah. And I said the next very important 2 words. First, it was, I failed, I give up. And the next one was, I believe you. Yeah. And I told her, I believe you. Wow. And I hung up the phone, and I fell to my knees, and I could not speak. I couldn't pray. I tried to pray. I just had to repent for about 3 hours in tears, thinking of this life I had taken credit for, and realizing that it was all grace, and that it was all a gift, and there was this God, and it was all real. And all this time I had fought against it. So that was the next step. And then after that, I had to, I sort of, after I made amends there, I could speak again, and my first prayer came to me, and that was 2 words, and it was, I'm sorry. And God bless that. I texted the karate teacher, and I said, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened. And he said 3 things. He said, praise God. He said, get a Bible. He said, read John.
Yes.
That's some of the best advice. Yes.
Briana says that all the time, too. That's awesome.
Yeah. I scrambled around and found a Bible. I read John, kind of fell in love with Jesus. A couple days later, back at home, I went to my local church, and I walked in, and I said, how do you give your life to Jesus? Wow. And they're like, come here. Yeah. So some people prayed with me, and just that everything changed. Everything changed, where I knew my purpose. I knew what I was supposed to do. I got my old job back at Salesforce, and I knew that I was supposed to be bold and use the gifts you'd given me there.
So good, Sue.
Wow. That is a powerful testimony. Yeah. Powerful. And so many layers to it. I love how you listen to the nudge of the Holy Spirit before you even knew the Holy Spirit at all, had any frame of reference, right? I mean, I think it's incredible, and I think that's so neat, and I think something that's a great takeaway for people is that you can trust that the Holy Spirit will speak to people even before they've made that choice, and that they are capable of hearing. You know, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. I think about, like, God is always speaking. It's just a matter of us, like, listening to Him. And I think that surrender is such a beautiful posture to actually listen to Him. The Bible says that, you know, my grace is sufficient for you in all things, and in your weakness, my strength is made perfect. And that weakness, I know that we, you know, if we're thinking, because I'm an achiever as well, I'm an accomplishment-based person, at weakness, like, oh, I don't want to be, but actually, you know, saying, God, I am going to surrender to you. I know that I can go far greater with you, listening to your voice, trusting, believing, and obeying, and moving forward than I can do on my own accord. And even if I can get far, it's not sustainable on my own. And the other thing, too, I just think about your Aunt Jean. And I just think about, and the karate teacher, just, you know, in those moments, trusting, listening to the voice of the Lord, trusting, obeying, and acting on it. I believe it created a tree in heaven. And now there are branches that are coming off of that tree because you, and I've told you this before, so you have this this experience, this encounter with Jesus, and then you just like start going. You're like the Apostle Paul in Silicon Valley. I always do, you know? And it's like you had this conversion experience, you had this radical encounter with Jesus, and then you just start going. And I just love how you, from the beginning, have broken down walls and have debunked the myth of walls that don't actually exist. So part of that is you starting Faithforce and Christian at Salesforce, just you and I think maybe one or two other people. What did that look like in starting that? What was that was new to Salesforce too, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there were actually a few people before me in both of those organizations. So just to give you some context, so most companies have these things called employee resource groups. Salesforce at the time had 9 of them, things for like the LGBT group, Women's Network, we have Latino Force, veterans, disabilities, everything. And so I had this conversion experience, and, you know, Christianity for me was not like a hobby. It wasn't just kind of an interest of mine. This was my entire being now. It was the most important thing in my entire life. And we say, bring your whole authentic self to work. Well, what if faith is one of the most important parts of yourself, your number 1 or number 2 identifiers? Can you bring that self to work, or do you have to check it at the door? Which you're going to be less motivated and less productive and less innovative. So I started to ask around, search around, and I noticed there was this Christian group, and it was really small. And so I thought, well, that's certainly one thing that God is asking me to do, is to kind of build that up, because that's a skill He's given me. He's trained me on organizational building. That's part of my job. Use it for me, he said. So we kind of that one grew from 5 to 10 to 50. It's now 500 people all around the world, and we have prayer almost every day of the week somewhere you can dial in. And it's very important, but it turns out that's like 5% of the story. The 95%, the much bigger story, and the story I want to convey so desperately to others, is the Faithforce story, and that is an interfaith group. So that a couple trailblazers had started that already, a Muslim woman and a Christian man, and had worked with the leaders before I had even kind of returned back to Salesforce, and had started that process of creating a faith group, a faith ERG, which is a really risky thing to do. Only maybe 20% of Fortune companies have a faith group, and it's often kind of siloed faith groups, like a Christian group and a Jewish group and a Muslim group. Not that many have interfaith groups. Ours was going to be interfaith. And I have to always, especially with the Christian audience, I have to clarify, it is not an interfaith theology. It's not saying all faiths are basically the same squishy spirituality. It's not that at all. It's an organizational structure, and that's it. It's just saying that to accomplish our goals of destigmatizing faith in the workplace and allowing people to bring their full authentic self, let's work together. So when Muslims have an Eid celebration, could the Christians and the Jews and the Sikhs come together and help organize that? And so that's the foundation of that, and that has absolutely skyrocketed. It's the fastest growing employee resource group in Salesforce history, at probably 3,000 members now, 17 hubs all around the world, and people talk about it all over the place, from the New York Times to Wall Street Journal.
And Mark Benoff, the CEO, in his book specifically mentioned it. And I think that you guys have become a city on the hill, so to speak, that the level of trust that you, first of all, the honor to your organization, but the trust and them knowing that they can trust you and to bringing your authentic self has been so powerful, not just for Salesforce, but I look around the other tech companies in Silicon Valley, and they're gaining momentum in similar ways too.
Yeah, I think so much of it is following that the Apostle Paul, actually. And he learned the language when he went into these towns, and all the disciples did, and they didn't just go in with their language, but they asked questions. I think that has been key, is not treating HR, human resources and Office of Equality, as the enemy, or these people, the police that won't let us do what we want, but really like understanding what do they have to deal with. This is a really hard situation that they're in, because once they open the door, one, does that mean people are going to fight? Two, does that mean that if we allow a Christian group, we have to allow the 37 other potential faith groups, and under those? I mean, it's a complicated situation. And so what was key for us has been to come alongside those leaders and respectfully, I always think of Nehemiah, like, if it pleases you, Lord, or Esther, if it works for you, could we, discuss this? That was the key for Faithforce.
Yeah, I think because sometimes people look at someone and they identify what they think they need, and they go after that instead of looking at them as a person and finding their humanity. And that's your starting point, and I think that's what Jesus did. He met us in our humanity, and so I think it's so important, like you said, to respect, like Ryan said, you've honored your company in the way you've done it, but then of course you have allowed people to come as they are without asking for compromise from anyone. And I love that. I love that you're able to just come in there with complete and total respect. And that is something that I think people, we talked about this before in our podcast, that we often confuse agreement with acceptance. And you don't have to agree to accept someone.
Yeah. That is so key. Yeah, I really appreciate that you call that out. And I think that I get a lot of pushback and criticism sometimes from the Christian community, more than any other community, and I'm okay with that. God has warned me about. He's given me the strength to manage it. But almost immediately when I say, like, oh, I've put on this event for the Sikhs or the atheists, or the assumption is that I'm somehow kind of worshiping those gods, and there's a dramatic line in the sand that I do not cross. I'm never worshiping another god. I'm simply loving my neighbor, and asking them about, why do you believe that, and what do you believe, and what's your story, and that is the most effective way for them to be curious, I think, too.
Something that you had said, I'm going to read off here so I don't quote you incorrectly here, but you had talked about a first-of-a-kind event that you'd had at Salesforce called Conversations with Atheists, and this is the quote of yours that's on there. It says, you said, like all groups, atheists are sometimes misunderstood, and the antidote to that is education, conversation, and empathy. As we state in our Faithforce mission statement, you said, we fight fear and bias through friendship and dialogue. And that is so good, so good. That is something that God has really put on our hearts for even just the whole podcast. Like, it's about conversation. That is how humanity is moving forward, is through conversation and understanding. And so I think, it's so neat to see and just to hear what you're doing and the way you're going about doing it, because it just really resonates with me. And I see how it is touching people on a level that I don't think they were being reached at before. Because again, you're appealing to who they are. You're seeing them for who they are, as opposed to an end goal, and I love that.
Yeah, relationship is not transactional. If we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus, we need to represent the love of Christ in an authentic manner. And that actually opens up an opportunity to share this beautiful testimony like you have, Sue. And I love, too, you said in one of your articles that would have practicing our faith to be less about our needs and more about understanding the needs of others, hearing their stories, and partnering with them on common goals. I just think that is such a beautiful representation of us, like, just like you said, like not seeing them as an end goal, but as an actual human being that God created those individuals. He created all of us. So,
I think there's sort of two strategies. What I'm seeing now that I'm in this Christian world is there's two strategies. There's many, but two big ones on kind of drawing people to Jesus. And one is to sort of build big, beautiful churches and big, beautiful, Christian groups, even in companies.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll be so big that people can see over the wall,
That's good.
The fireworks go over the wall. Yeah.
There's the other strategy of let me go to them. Let me go to them, small and humble, and ask questions and love them. And, this atheist event was just yesterday at Salesforce on Friday anyway. And, it was a big deal for us to have this. It was 2.5 years in the making of kind of building relationship till we got to this point, and it was this huge success. 70 people from around the world came from all different faith perspectives, and atheists for the first time felt heard and felt valid and felt part of the conversation. And many of them said, and these were sometimes older folks who said, I have never experienced this in my life, and certainly never on the job, of somebody asking what I think and listening. And every single panelist was completely different and had vastly different reasons why they were atheist or agnostic. And you would never know if you didn't ask.
Yeah,
exactly. You have to start those conversations. Yeah.
So what are some of the walls that you've seen, and how do you approach those walls and breaking them down? And are they real?
Yeah, I think that they are real, but I think that they're paper thin.
Okay.
And you can blow them away with a question. So yes, there's walls between, say Christians and atheists in America, all over the world. And you can simply ask, why are you atheist? Can you share your story? How do you identify as an atheist? Kind of what, share your background. My favorite question in the world for anybody is a two-parter, and it's, what is your faith background? How did you grow up? Those two questions put together, they have to be together, because what is your faith background takes them out of the moment and takes them to the past. And that's a little less direct. Yeah. And it gives them a chance to, it's not so personal how you grew up. And so they start sharing, their story. And they like, even if it's a traumatic story, like I was, my church was awful to me. They like to share that. Just like if you say, what's your favorite or least favorite restaurant? Like you like answering that question because it's your opinion and it's your story. And so almost it works. I've never seen those two questions not work at unlocking a person. So so that's how I blow the paper thin wall away. I wish more would do that, because it's so easy once you try it, once you practice it. I teach this to interns, how to do this. We do conversation starters. Another thing is when people share their background, instead of pivoting to Jesus, lean into that, because what they're doing is offering you a piece of their heart. They're saying, they're trusting you enough to tell you a piece of them, and it's like a tiny little seedling. And you have a decision. You can stomp on it by talking about yourself and your beliefs, or you can water it by saying, wow, tell me more. What was that like? And that, to me, is the biggest thing. So the walls, I think, are just fear and assumptions. And Christians make them as frequently as they are made about Christians. We're all similar in that, and we can break them down. But I don't think that they're that big.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, too, how you felt about this, because like you said, you've been following Jesus for 3 years, right? And I think a lot of people, and maybe a lot of our listeners, maybe they've been following Jesus a lot longer. And I think one of the things that can actually happen is how you came in kind of understanding how to relate to people and not assuming there are these huge walls. That's actually something that they have to unlearn. And that can be a lot more difficult to unlearn and relearn than to just walk into it with like the perspective that you had, which is, I think, amazing, and maybe partly why it almost seems accelerated for you, because you didn't have to unlearn. You're able just to move right there and then. So what would you say to someone who maybe this is a paradigm shift for them and they're kind of unlearning what they thought the walls were like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do feel unburdened in that way. I don't come with a church background. I don't kind of carry that with me. And so I can just simply pray and do what God says to do. So my advice for kind of unlearning all of that is, at least what I do is, I of course pray every morning, and my ritual is I go through the Lord's Prayer and I say, when I get to daily bread, that's a really important line for me. And for whatever reason, God has instructed me to stop there and look at my day ahead, look at the calendar that I have, and say, if I could ask for that manna, God will give it to me.
Yes.
He's going to give me, he's going to feed me today.
Yeah.
But if I could ask for one thing that I need most help with, what would it be? And always something highlights. And it's not always what I thought. Maybe I thought it was going to be this big meeting with this person who's angry at me, but it's actually this other thing. He'll feed me and nurture me on all sorts of different problems, but it helps tremendously to ask, what is my daily bread? And then, one of my favorite verses is, Isaiah 30:21, whether you look to the right or to the left, you will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk.
Yes.
So it's, to me, all it comes down to is, what am I supposed to do today, God?
Yeah, that's so good.
Not the whole history of the church and, my mission and all. It's like, what do you have for me today? And then do it.
I love that.
And it's usually doable. It's usually bite-sized, and it's usually a baby step. It's probably not what you think, and it's not necessarily build a faith group at your work.
Right.
The achievers think like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do now.
Right.
And maybe you are, and maybe you aren't. Maybe you're supposed to watch the news and pay attention to the fact that a sick temple was just attacked in Afghanistan.
Right.
And there's a sick employee, and reach out to him on Hangout and say, oh my gosh, I want to love you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And, so just do the baby step that God has for you today. And that's it.
Yeah, I love that because I think that awareness of his presence, and like you're saying, the daily bread, that manna, that he has something for you every day. And I do think so many times we get caught up trying to fix what we think we need to fix, or go back, or do whatever it is we need to do, that somehow we're not in the right place. But he's with you in this moment. He's gone ahead of you to this moment. And this is a point where you can move from right here. You don't have to go anywhere, but just follow him right here. I love that.
Can I share a bonus tip?
Yes, please.
Really unlocked me this year is learning about Jabez, the character Jabez in the Book of Chronicles. They're one of these long chapters reading all these names, and he's like the one character where he prayed, and this was his prayer. And there's this wonderful book called The Prayer of Jabez, and he said, Lord, bless me indeed, expand my territory, keep evil from me, that I may feel no pain and do no harm. May your hand be on me. And after I go through my reading and my prayer and I figure out my daily bread, I say that, and it's like this enormous shield around me. May I do no harm, may I feel no pain, may your hand be on me. And then the important part is, bless me indeed. It's a bold prayer. It's like, I'm going to do this step that you have for me, and you're going to multiply it by 100. And I know you will, because I've asked for it. And you say, so it's invigorating once I say that. I say it every single day.
That is, there's so much in that. That is so rich.
So we'll just go another 30 minutes now and just talk about the prayer of Jabez. So
good. Oh my gosh.
It's like, I have these all over the place.
I
buy them for people because I think it's just like, if you could do two things, ask for your daily bread and pray the prayer of Jabez and just go do it.
I love it. Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for your time today and just for sharing with us. I mean, your life speaks. You are like, you're Sue in Silicon Valley, but you like the Apostle Paul. And I'll share one last story. When I went to Salesforce to meet with you, and we were in the lobby, and one of the security guards came up and just almost just ran to you like, Sue, I tried out that church, and he was, thank you so much. I think that you had done an Easter service at Salesforce with a boys choir, and it was so impactful to him. And that doesn't just happen by you just saying things, but you actually living the love of Christ. And it was attractive, and I couldn't think of a better representation than this security guard running towards you just to bear hug you and say thank you for like opening up my world. And so Sue, I'm just so thankful to get to know you, and I'm so thankful that you are tearing down walls and debunking the idea that these walls are so hard and firm when actually they're paper thin. And if you'll just obey and follow the voice of God, you'll see how quickly those walls come down. Yeah, I just love that. I love that, just your daily just submission to the voice and the heart of God. I love it. This has really spoken to me, really ministered to me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's such an opportunity to share with you, and I'm so grateful that you have this podcast too. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Sue.